Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear and see me okay. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Melis. I use she and her pronouns, and it's great to be here. I'm currently based in Abidjan, Côte d'Ivoire, and if you need a visual description, I'm a Black cisgender female presenting person. I identify as queer bisexual. I have Black Afro hair, a pair of clear glasses. I'm wearing this mustard polo neck and sitting in what looks like a bird cage, but is actually my chair and slash office slash many other things. I'm a personal transformational coach and consultant, and I'm also the program director at We Create Space. And for those who don't know about us, well, essentially, we are a global nonprofit platform, a community, and a collective of queer change makers on this powerful mission to improve the lives of LGBTQ plus people around the world. And we really do this through, spaces like these, connecting our communities and allies with tools, knowledge, and a support network for personal growth, self-care, and queer leadership. So if you're new to this space, really, we welcome you. For those who are actually returning, we hope you've been keeping well. You can also use the chat to kind of introduce yourselves and just check in and tell us how you're feeling. As you know, we've been on slight hiatus since May to focus on all things Pride and beyond, and also expanding our spaces and communities outside of the UK. So a little shout out to the team making things happen in Barcelona. But really, why are we here? I think centering back to today's agenda, we're bringing you another Queer Leadership 101 session. And this time we're exploring how to define and affirm our values as LGBTQ plus leaders and allies. And we're joined by some amazing people, Kim Wooner and Alan Cato-Di-Cromo, who will shortly introduce themselves. So before I hand over and kind of go back into my little function as coordinator and I guess overseer of chat and everything else that, Kim and Alan might need, I'd like to just make you aware that, this session is we really invite you to kind of participate as much as possible. You have the opportunity to ask questions at the end via the Q&A, but also the chat's open to just land your thoughts, your ideas, your reflections throughout, okay? So without carrying on any further, Kim, I'm gonna hand over to you to tell us a bit about yourself and take us through.
All right, hi. Thank you, Melis, and hello, everyone. My name is Kim Wooner. I am a leadership and business coach. I coach from a feminist perspective. A little bit about me. I use she, her pronouns. I identify as a gay woman. I am a mother to a tween. And I live in the Finger Lakes region of New York. I come from an Italian-American heritage by way of North Jersey, and then found my way up here to the beautiful and wonderful Finger Lakes just a few months ago, where I live with my partner, our dogs, our cats, and my daughter. We have a full house. So I'm super happy to be here and be partnering with We Create Space and getting to know Alan and having conversations around affirming our values and leading from that place. I'm 1000% about aligning. I am a certified coach. I come from a presence-based place. So the work that I do gets us in our body, going off the idea that our greatest resiliency is inside of us. And that we can use somatic awareness, we can use a state of presence to really create change, coming from our greatest heart and our strength. So that's where I speak to. I work with women, and I work with the gay and queer community specifically, as we have all had a go at it. And the greatest change, I think we are fabulous, amazing people. And we work specifically with those groups to overcome challenges, to step into our authenticity, develop the skills, develop the resiliency to create lives that lead by example. So a little bit about me at the moment. I'm going to pass that on to Alan. Alan, we would love to hear from you.
Thank you very much, Kim. Hi, everybody. My name is Alan Cato-Di-Cromo, and my pronouns are he, him. I am wearing a brown overshirt and a white t-shirt underneath. I am a queer man, and I'm working in finance, and I'm dialing in from Amsterdam. That's home. But I was born and raised in South America, and the country is Suriname. I've been living in Amsterdam for now 11 years. Yeah, 11 years. I have a very diverse cultural background, um, and I'm constantly looking into ways, especially it's also my job, but also outside of work, to promote more inclusion and for everybody to have same opportunities, and create a culture, of course, of belonging. I'm very passionate in my work also, where I can get to create change within financial institutes and create that awareness also, where I really can help people, and I'm very passionate about that. Also calling myself the corporate activist for inclusion. That's a little bit about me.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Alan, for introducing yourself and telling us about a little bit about yourself. And we're going to have a conversation with Alan a little bit further about this. I love that phrase, corporate activist. I might even need to borrow or put it on a shirt or something. And we're going to revisit that a little bit later and kind of dive into your work and how you do and what you do and the importance of that work. I'm looking forward to that. If everyone is ready, what I'd like to do to start off this session is that we are going to co-create some space. So what I want to do with that is we've all been through our mornings, our afternoons already, depending where we are in the world. And what an exciting global community we have here. And I want to bring some intentionality to the space, because a lot of our work today is going to focus on heart-centered space. We're going to look at a co-create community. We're going to talk about inclusion. And so in able to do that, I want us to really be able to center in and go heart forward. So with that, I'm going to lead all of us in a little bit of a grounding, right? We all might have a practice or be familiar, and we're going to do all this together. So with that, I would invite everyone to, if you're sitting or standing, to sit or stand nice and tall. Maybe find your feet on the ground. I'm going to invite you to close your eyes or soften your gaze in front of you. And together, all of us, I want you to put your hand on your heart. With that, as you soften your gaze, close your eyes, turn your attention inward. Start to bring it in by finding your feet on the floor. Find the bottoms of your feet where they connect with the earth, where they connect with the floor. Take a deep breath in. And a nice cleansing exhale. Let's take another deep breath in. Exhale. And start to bring your breath to that pattern, being aware of your inhale and your exhale. And use your exhale to clear the day, clear your to-do list, clear your morning, your afternoon right now. Just be here. Deep breath in, deep breath out. Knowing that there are people all around the world. We're doing this together. Today we're going to talk about our values. And the values are intrinsically impersonal things. And to know your value, we need to lead with our heart. So I want to direct your attention to that heart space in the center of your chest. Breathe into your heart. Give it some space. Green is the color associated with the heart chakra. So as you breathe in and breathe out, with each expanding inhale, find the green color of your heart, the shade of green. Maybe it's a Kelly green, maybe it's a soft green, maybe it's luminous. Find that green color and let it fill your chest, expanding with each breath, filling your body with the warmth, that fresh green color. And as you expand, maybe you find that color expanding out, be past the confines of the outline of your body. Wrapping yourself in your heart-centeredness. Feeling alive. Feeling focused, feeling refreshed. When you're ready, I'm going to invite you to open your eyes, bring up your gaze, and join me. Excellent. I would invite all of you to write in the chat maybe how you're feeling right now after that centering exercise. A word. Tell us how you're feeling. All right. So to get started, how the next 45 minutes are going to go, we're going to look at being able to define our values. I'm going to walk you through an exercise to start to learn. We talked about body and how your body informs you of when your values are being guided or not, right? And that's somatic awareness. We're going to talk a little bit about that. Then Alan's going to join us. We're going to have a conversation about a value-based workplace. And then after we speak with Alan, we're going to do a little bit about affirming our values. How can we revisit them? How can we feel connected to them when there are so many different factors coming at us, different initiatives, different factors that we are aligned to? How do we stay true to ourselves, especially during transitions, right? There's so many transitions happening in the workplace and our lives. So how do we stay centered and focused? And then you're going to have an opportunity for a live Q&A at the end. So about 10 minutes, we're going to do that via the chat. Melis is going to work with us on that. So you have an opportunity to ask some questions, and then we'll wrap up. So we've got a nice value-packed, action-packed 45 minutes. So let's get started. So we're talking about values. So to start off this webinar, I want to define values, right? Language is subjective. Language is also evolving, and words mean different things to everyone. So I want to set the stage with what we're talking about when we talk about what our values are. So our values can be defined, it's up here, as a person's principles or standards of behavior, one's judgment of what's important in life, right? And so we might think that many of us all have same values. What's important to us, like, of course, that would be important to someone else. You know, something as basic as respect, right? Respect for other people. But then we go further into that. Well, what does respect for other people really mean? And what does that look like, right? There's so much to unpack in our values, which is why it's important that we stay connected. So we're going to go back to this definition time and time again throughout our webinar of a person's principles or standards of behavior, right? And in leadership is an action, right? It's a very active word. And so that's why we put in here standards of behavior, because our values affect how we behave, and your judgment of what's important in life. So that is then affected by our beliefs. So we want to take a step back and look at our beliefs, because our values come from what we believe. So our beliefs are two definitions in here. It's two-part. One, an acceptance that a statement is true or that something exists. Okay. And second is trust, faith, or confidence in someone or something. So let's give examples. So for the first part of the definition, we might use an example of a statement: she believes in the importance of hard work. Okay, that's a statement. When we look at someone, maybe we're talking about a coworker, we believe that she believes in the importance of hard work, right? And that's a belief we have about that person. In the other definition, an example might be a sentence of they believe in their team's ability to make the deadline. So in that instance, it's something that we have faith is going to happen, right? Or we're going to trust in. And knowing what we believe is important to really dive into, because that gives our value shape. And we're going to come back to that in a little bit. So with that, I wanted to show you how all of this leads up. So the key here is a value-aligned leadership model. So as people out in the community, where we're looking to change culture, we're looking to make the world a better place, right? Whether it's professionally or personally, and in the workplace, we have a leadership model that helps us understand how we do it. And each piece of this leadership model needs to be aligned, right? So we start with identifying our beliefs. From those beliefs, we identify what our values are. A value is going to affect our behaviors, which is then going to have the impact. So whether or not we're trying to shape a team culture, a corporate culture, a community culture, we need to have this alignment across all four parts of this leadership model. And what's important about it is that when we're able to walk the walk and we're able to stay aligned, we're also leading by example for the people around us. Is we're trying to bring forward places where we intersect, where we have our intersectionality of our places of origin, of our gender, of our sexuality, of our skill sets, and then doing all of that in a corporate culture. We need to be able to walk the walk, not only for ourselves, but for the people who we are mentoring, the people who we are leading, and then also to be leaders in the organization, bringing it forward. And this is how we know when we're in integrity. And so shortly, we're going to walk through an exercise to talk about our integrity. So when I mentioned that, right, we use the word integrity, the definition of integrity, right, is in whole, right? It's actually a scientific term, as when you are whole is when you are in integrity. And so when you're only acting partially in line with your beliefs and who you are, your authentic self, then we're actually not in integrity. Integrity is such a great word, because when we're able to be our whole selves and show up as our whole selves, to act from that place, to take action and not be in reaction, that's when the universe makes space. That's when people listen. That's when we're really able to affect change. And that all comes back to what we believe and what we value. So I have two writing prompts I want us to look at. One is, what are your core beliefs? And the second, what is important to you? These are going to be for you to take home, because they take some time, right? And I want you to have space and time. And we're going to go back to those in a little bit. But write these down. What are your core beliefs and what is important to you? Maybe you believe everyone deserves a seat at a table. Maybe you believe everyone has a right to a life they can thrive, right? Okay, so if you believe that, then what is important to you about that, right? So if you believe that everyone has a life where they can thrive, well, what about that is important to you? What does that look like to you? And again, we're going to go back to these, but these are ideal. And ideally, we're going to create a practice where we can keep revisiting these and keep aligning ourselves so that we can stay accountable to what our beliefs are. So from here, what I'd like to do is I want to walk us through a somatic practice that signals us when we're in our integrity. So for those of us who aren't familiar, again, we're going to define the term of somatic awareness is when a person acknowledges their own self within their environment and uses sensations that are physical to identify psychological, physiological, and social factors to promote healing and self-regulation. What a great concept, right? And so boiling that down is that our body talks to us. Our body knows what's going on, right? When we think about what's above our head, the voices, the thoughts, that is our ego. And our ego wants to protect us. And so it talks a lot, it's dominant often, and it wants to keep us where we are. But for us being leaders, us having courage, us being brave, we need to say, I see you, but I'm going to go what's up in here. I'm going to go what's in my heart. And I'm going to be in my integrity. And the way we do that is our body can give us somatic cues as to when our values are being challenged and we are out of alignment, and when we are actually in alignment. So I'm going to walk you through an exercise. And part one, this was why it was important to get into our body earlier. I would like to ask each of you to focus for a moment, to close your eyes, maybe, again, soften your gaze. And I want you to think of a time recently, very recently, when you had to make a different decision. And in retrospect, you realized that you did not align to your true self and your values. Maybe it was a conversation at work. Maybe you just reacted and didn't act. But in retrospect, it didn't feel great, maybe. So let's recreate that experience. I mean, I want every detail. I want you to feel like you're in that experience right now. What room were you in? Picture the room. Know the circumstance. What were you wearing? Who was in the room? What was the conversation? And at that point, when you felt out of alignment, go into your body. What did that feel like? Where was it? Did your shoulders tighten? Was it in your chest? Did you get a headache? Heart start breathing? Maybe your stomach hurt? It's different for everyone, but you know what that felt like. And I want you to dial into just what that feeling is. Maybe you write it down. Next, how do you feel about that now? When you look back at that experience and look back at that feeling, what are your thoughts? What's your relationship to that moment? Are you proud of it? Are you not proud of it? Do you wish you would have done something differently? What's your relationship to it? Was it a learning experience? Right now, we're making it a learning experience. Okay, so I want you to shake that off. We're going to go to another one. So now I want you to think about when you needed to make a different decision, a difficult decision, and you felt aligned to your highest self and your truest values, that you saw that opportunity and you were able to step into it. Let's recreate that situation. Where were you? What was the conversation? What were you wearing? Down to the greatest detail. Who was in the room? What was being asked of you? What did you say? Now, after all of those details, focus in on your body, focus in on your heart. What did that feel like? Did your heart start to pick up? Did you feel excited? Did your eyes widen? Did you feel peaceful? Did you get a a Jedi moment? You feel very focused, centered. What's that feel like? And when you think about that experience now, how do you relate to it? Are you proud of it? Was there something in there for you? What was it telling you? So I want you to note the difference between both of those feelings. That is your body keeping you in integrity. That is your body telling you when it's time to use your voice about your values. Note the difference, because these will be your cues as you go on about your day, as you go on about your weeks and in your career, of when your values are coming up against being challenged or there being opportunity for you to move forward. There's always an opportunity to move forward. It's just looking at what the situation is and how you're going to handle it. This is what we call somatic awareness. All right, so with that, I'm going to invite Alan to share his video. And Alan and I are going to talk a little bit about this kind of work.
Let's see, start my video. Yes, it's working.
There he is.
Perfect.
Hi, Alan.
Hi, Kim.
Hi. So I would love to just start the conversation, just dive right in. You talked a little bit about being a corporate advocate. I know your title is culture change maker.
Yeah, culture. Yeah, culture change maker. Yeah.
What an amazing title. And you do this at a financial institution.
Yes,
So can
that's
you tell
correct.
us a little bit about what a culture change maker is, and the work that you do?
Of course, I can. For in corporate institute or a financial institute, there is a certain kind of culture that's there, but that culture is like it's very institutionalized and very old and not from this time anymore. As we're If you just walk outside of the door, if you look at this group of amazing people that actually tuned in today, the world doesn't look the same as it was like quite a while ago. So we're living in a big change. There are big topics that we're talking about right now. We're having the room for people to be more themselves, and minorities are speaking up. But also big topics like climate change, sustainability are very big topics. So in this change, we actually need, as a financial institute, people to guide that whole change process. And that's what I'm doing. That's a little bit about me, and I'm specifically there to guide the DNI strategic objectives, and that's diversity and inclusion. Very glad to actually be part of that great change, because it's
Yeah.
about people.
Yes. So there's this global sense of change, right? Culture change. And then there's the institution, and then
Yeah.
the culture of the people, right? So there's just change everywhere. So I love that your institution has that role, and that you're in.
Yeah, of course. And what you said earlier about a value, it's after a lot of research, of course. I don't know if you know the iceberg model on culture, like what you see on top and what's also at the bottom of the iceberg model, the things that you see and how people perceive each other. For example, if I would see you, I would see maybe a woman because I'm biased and that's what I know and that's what like cognitive information I'm having and processing. Where we're living right now in a world where there is no norm. You cannot just go around thinking that you know and know people. And we have to be inclusive, of course, in these situations because we're talking about people's values. And that's where the core and where we bring everything together, what you said about being a value driven culture within our financial institute. And that's where we bring people together and put them in their strength also.
So Alan, how do you how do you do that? When, I mean, that is probably a much longer answer, but when we come up with, right, the intersectionality of people, right? That, like, you
Yeah,
use that example, you might see I'm a woman, but if I didn't tell you, you wouldn't know I'm Italian American. You might not know that I identify as gay or that I'm a mother or any of those things, right?
yeah.
You might have a story that you've created through your own biases. So, and then how do we make space for people? How do we make space for that, for people, all the different perspectives to be included and people to be able to, know their values?
That's actually a very simple question, but the answer is actually very complicated because we're talking about change, and that takes a very long process from getting from point A to point B, because you have to change your values, your beliefs, the way you perceive the
Mm,
world, the way you talk, and also like how you see people. So it is we're at the start of this big change, and it starts with the hard things like policies and rules and regulations, and freeing that space up on paper. But I mean, like, it's a piece of paper, but it doesn't do anything. It's just a piece of paper. People still have to act on what's written there. So that's where you guide the process. That's where you make people aware. That's where you actually analyze and go and start that dialogue about me being, for example, different than you. So what I need, you don't need. Um, we need both different things to actually be happy in your role, be happy in society. There is a bigger picture, of course, because my life doesn't stop at work.
right, right, right. Which brings us like that iceberg model, right? That there's so
Yeah.
much more underneath what we see above the water of the iceberg, right? So
Yeah,
what?
and it used to
Um,
be, yeah.
no, please keep going.
It right now, of course, we're starting to see this big change in people bringing their true, authentic self to work, or at least that's what we want. That's the big change. That's what we want people to do. But we've been living in a society, like in a world where the system doesn't support that. You always need to be a role, so you are a role within at your work. And then when you're at home, you're a mother, you have you're a friend, you're queer, you have different identities that you show. So why do those things, actually, if you're talking about authentic leadership, you have to show those things because that's part of you, that's authentic, if you're talking about authenticity. And that's the whole leadership part, guiding people through that process and showing their true authentic self so you can be a strong leader,
Mhm.
which we need.
Which we need. And I love that, right? I've always thought that, that theory of, like, leave work at the door. I mean, leave home at the door, right? When you walk into work, you're supposed to leave home, leave emotions, leave everything at home and just walk in and work. But that doesn't, we're not machines, right? You can't turn it on and off. And we are a whole person. And why wouldn't we want, well, I mean, there's reasons, but in why wouldn't you want the whole person, right? Because there's such depth
Yeah,
and insight that we have the ability to bring forward if we're allowed to, right? It's actually very suffocating to not be your authentic self. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. But also like being judged on something that you're not, so you'll always fail because nobody can judge you on something that you're not. You can only be um, judged and get better for the true authentic self that you are, so you can like
Hmm.
see where you can develop more, that's close to you.
Hmm.
And that's where also the whole thing comes from. When you get mentally stuck, you really have to look out and take space for yourself, because people are expecting you to be something that you're not. But if you lead from authentic source, that problem shouldn't persist.
Yes. Do you find, well, I think we've all come across, like, identifying as queer, um, that in particular is a challenge that you're coming up against something you're not, people might have expectations or thoughts about what that means. And really being able to be your authentic self, right? Queer and everything else that comes with it, and you as a person. So is in particular a challenge, right? But that it seems the workplace now, and especially with roles like yours at your institution, might be making space for that, which I think is the next evolution of business.
Yes, of course. I do think that, because like not only in my line of work or in financial institutions, because they are very powerful, of course, financial institutions, but everywhere you see that there are um, things are changing a lot, like especially the smaller companies, the hip ones, not the old ones like where I work for, but the hip companies, they are progressive, they are inclusive, and they are innovative, and that's something that we need in this time, of course, because we need to have that change, and then you need to have creativity, and not get stuck in what we used to do. So in some sense, you don't have any choice but to go through that change, and that's accepting the people for who they are. For me, as being queer, but also all of my other identities, there needs to be space for that.
There absolutely does, right? And I love that we're doing it, and that starts with the person, right? Knowing who they are, having space to do it, having the support to do it, because none of us can do this alone, right? And we'll talk a little bit about that, like being accountable to your values, right? And being able to affirm them and move forward in that with those. Because that's really like, how do we bring this down to the individual level, that we have the strength and the courage to do exactly what you're speaking about, which is brilliant and brave.
Being a role model also,
Mm-hmm.
for your own community, of course, and what you stand for. That's super important, because a lot of people, and when I speak to people, our colleagues of mine, they tend to not know how much power they have just by being themselves
Mm-hmm.
and being a role model for their environment.
Absolutely. Yeah. Being a role model is everything. And I don't think we might even recognize, right, that in doing it, that we are being a role model. I think we'll have some questions in the Q&A about that, about how to be a role model. How do companies get unstuck when they want to become more responsive? So we're going to move on for a few more minutes, talk about accountability, and then move into the Q&A. Sound good? All right. Thank you, Ellen. Be back in about 10 minutes. Okay. You okay? Okay. Okay. So we're going to move into like part 2 or part 3. We're going to talk a little bit more about how can you, as a leader, stay accountable to your values. And so this is where we get into the concept of introspection, which is where this idea of presence feeds into, and knowing who you are and what you value. So here we see introspection. We define it as the examination or observations of one's own mental and emotional process. Quiet introspection can be extremely valuable. It is very valuable. And it's a way of us really knowing who we are and what our values are, and getting quiet, right? And shutting out the noise outside of us. We talk about neck up, bottom down, right? We talked about that earlier. And so introspection really lets us see how we process, and that's where we can make change. So when we are able to have moments of introspection, we can go into affirming our values. How do we keep our values affirmed when we have all of these competing ideas, ideologies, things that we are being held accountable to, right? So maybe it's your business goals, maybe it's the objectives of your department, maybe it's our DEI initiatives, maybe it is the initiatives of your community, right? And all the identities that you feel and represent that you want to stay true to, right? They could all be competing factors. It could just be a lot for a person to shoulder and manage. So we want to take all of that and see how you digest it, and what it means for you. Because living in alignment is hard when we have all these competing factors. And of course, then we've got culture coming at us. We've got the news coming at us, the greater world. So in order to have conviction, we need to know and be peaceful and be connected to what our values are. And so that starts with affirmation. So there are some benefits to affirming our values. Okay. And this goes back to those 2 journaling prompts I gave you. I'm going to walk you through those. Again, it's what are my beliefs and what's important to me. So when we affirm our values, these are the benefits, right? First, it reduces stress because you're connecting to yourself and you have a sense of presence and you're in heart space. And we all know that there's science about mindfulness and about spending time and understanding and getting into our heart, right? So values affirmation reduces stress. Next, it strengthens your resiliency. I define resiliency as the ability to make decisions, good decisions, no matter what's coming at you. And so when you stay aligned, when you have presence, then you're resilient, right? It's a core foundation to resiliency. And we as leaders need to be able to be resilient. Values affirmation increases openness because if you know where you stand, if you know what you feel, then you're looking for possibility and you're looking for that in others and you're instilling that in other people, right? Openness, right? We want people to understand and see our values, and we want to invite that for other people. But first, in order to do that, we need to know what our own are. Next, with values affirmation is that it improves accuracy. You have your own goals, your own objectives. It's your North Star. In order to keep going towards your North Star, you need to know what it is, right? So that's values affirmation. And then finally, it closes achievement gaps. And that's what we were talking about a little bit with Alan. He was talking about you can't be judged on what you're not. And people will have stories about you. People will hold you to standards and they'll expect you to be a certain way. And we want to close those gaps and just be who we are and be authentic and let people know who we are and what we stand for. But again, that goes back with knowing it for yourself. So this is the work that we need to do. And we do that with a daily practice. So I want to give you kind of some homework, if you will. So as kind of how we stay aligned, right? And so this is the accountability piece. And we're going to get to that shortly. But before we do, I want to talk a little bit about transitions because a big part of what Alan and I spoke about was change, right? And change is all around us, whether it's the climate and the environment, whether it's culture, right? And we're seeing culture change, whether it is in your own life, we're changing jobs, our family dynamics are changing, we ourselves are changing, right? And when that happens, it kind of feels like there's no ground underneath you. The ground's been pulled out. I just went through a big change. I just moved into the Finger Lakes from being outside of Philadelphia for 20 years, just a month ago. I had no idea how big that change was going to be and what it brought me up against and what I had to face in order to make this transition to a new community, a new environment. One I'm excited for, and it was a positive change, but a massive change nonetheless. So how do I do that? And how did we do that, right? So when we look at transition, we think about transitions as the mental process that gets us through the change, right? And so transitions means staying aligned to your core, right? Staying aligned to your core values. And so how we do that is by staying accountable. It's revisiting it every day. So even at work, even if you're moving, even if you're changing relationships, having that time of introspection. So yeah, we'll go to that slide of how do we stay accountable. So the first thing is that we want to give ourselves some time and space to process. Whether we're leading, whether we come up against something that's challenging. So say you're in a meeting and someone is asking you a question, how do you feel about this? And you're not really quite sure. And you got that feeling in your belly or maybe in your shoulders that we identified earlier. Maybe you use a phrase of, I've taken note of that. I need some time to process. I'll get back to you when I'm ready to talk about this, right? That lets person know you've heard their conversation, you've heard what they brought up, but your body is signaling that you're not exactly sure what you want to do. We want you to be in a space to take action. So you give yourself that space. Give yourself space to stay true to your North Star. Second is that I love the idea of an accountability group. And this group exists outside of your workplace. So these are friends or peers who have the same values. So maybe it's a text chain, maybe it's a virtual group, maybe you meet in person, but there's a place you can go for support where it's, hey, I'm up against this. I'm a little conflicted how to handle it. And you can brainstorm together, or you can get support of, I was in a situation, this is how I handled it, and vice versa. And that does everything to give you a sense of community, different perspectives, different points of view, but staying again true to supporting your mission, your goal, your vision. And thirdly, I advise everyone to have a mentor. This is going to be in your company. Your mentor is going to be at least 2 levels up from where you are, because your manager is not your mentor. Your manager has other goals and other things they're up against. We want something that's someone who's purely in your court, someone who can open doors for you, someone who ideally has the same values and demonstrated as you, so that they can open doors and you can brainstorm and have ideas off of them, someone who has walked that walk and been in those challenging situations. So these are 3 skills that you can take away to align yourself and stay accountable to the values you have. Okay. So with that, we're going to go over to the Q&A section for Alan and myself. I see up here in the chat, we've got some great questions. And so I'm going to start with the first one. This one's for Alan. What would you recommend a company that feels stuck and wants to become more hip, but doesn't know how? When we talked about hip, right, it was being more open and inclusive, value-driven. What would you recommend for that kind of company?
Well, first of all, determine on where do you get stuck, because it's people who make culture, like behavior and the values of people coming together. Because if you're alone, you don't have culture; it does not exist. But if you're in a company and you're coming together, you form a culture together with your own behaviors, your thoughts, your beliefs, your values, so your core values. And I think the key for that is to tap into that, into the soul of the company. Like, what do we stand for as a company?
Mm.
And then if you ask these questions, and that's of course a kind of a big research to ask these questionnaires on where do people stand, and versus on where do we want to be as a company, but what are the company values, and then interlinking those two together, like where do I stand in this whole process, and going from there, and then you can close the gap.
Mm. I love that. So it's people informed. Go into your people, your greatest resource. And I did. So instead of coming from the top down, it's coming from the groundswell of the employees and the talent in the company.
Exactly, but also defining what the company stands for, because, and that's the whole thing with leadership. Um, a leader, he has certain values, and he will also lead from his core values. So if he believes in making money and not believes in his people, then you can try to make the company more inclusive, etc. But you will never change the systems, the policies, guide in certain direction where there is more inclusivity towards colleagues. So you need to be aware of that. You cannot change every company, but if the company wants to change, then it needs to come from the people.
I love that. So it's not policy, it's people, it's everything, right? It's all those levels.
Yeah.
Awesome. I have another question. How do you suggest we tackle the inclusion and diversity that our teams may have, but only because it's a company policy? In fact, they might not be interested in knowing our true selves. So it kind of sounds like in this question, what I'm hearing is that there might be the piece of paper, right?
Yeah.
That the culture hasn't been shaped like space for the diversity, right? So there's a disconnect between what the company says they stand for and how they're actually behaving when we go up to that leadership level.
True. It sounds like a sort of a mandatory thing, like a check in the box. You can never check and put people and check them in a box. It doesn't work like that. And this is where we're talking about conflicting values. So somebody can have like this idea of leading this team and becoming the best manager, where the company thinks, being the best manager should be the KPIs, reaching your KPIs, and working harder day and night. Where there is no room for the people, it's just a policy. Nobody asks anything about like, how are your people doing? How's their mental health? Are they working over? um, can they be themselves? Are they happy?
Yeah.
So you see those conflicting things on leadership. Is like, your manager's boss, is he asking the right questions for their, in order to lead his team in a certain way where there is room for everybody? So I think the question is a little bit bigger. So it's something more of, hierarchical thing that runs through all of the company levels. How is his manager treating him? And is it just a policy?
Right. And so what happens if we discover kind of is just a policy, right? That it's not really in effect. What does someone do in that situation?
There's a lot of things you can do. Of course, you
I
can,
love that.
form an alliance. Form an alliance. We have the mentorship. um, and I'm a very big fan of a reverse mentorship, because that's where you get the lower levels in contact with the higher, senior managers on C-level, and talking about things that you're running into, like, on my daily job, like, if um, how does my manager make this environment safe for me, and those questions you can talk about that,
Mhm.
and what the company actually needs. So you create your own space. So I
Exactly.
can tell my manager, this is what a sea devil said to me. So I'm taking that space for me.
I love that. I love that. So it's really self-direction, right? And kind of taking like the bull by the horns, um, and looking for possibility and opportunity, um, to be able to like walk the walk, right? And put that policy in place and take charge.
Yeah. And
Those are
another
all,
thing, and it's maybe something smaller you can do, is tap into what you need. What do you need? And can you create that change in your role? If the answer is very simple, no, then, it might be a hard thing to do, but maybe that environment is then not for you. Because if it can never provide you safety, you
mhm.
cannot fight the system forever. Choose your battles also.
Yeah, absolutely. There's that, right? There's at some point of looking with what you've got, and seeing what's best for you, right? And that it might not be the best environment, or
I
if you don't,
can't hear you.
oh, you can't hear me? Can you hear me now?
Or maybe it's me.
Can you hear me? Okay.
I can hear you, Kim.
Okay, good.
Maybe
Okay.
that's, check your settings.
Okay. Um, well, I can certainly continue on, Alan, and we'll see where Alan's settings are. Thank you for letting me know you can hear both of us. So I think Alan had a great answer
Um,
to the question.
1 second. I still cannot hear you.
Okay. Um, well, while Alan's working on his settings, I think there were really great thoughts about this reverse mentorship and having the space, and creating space for yourself, right, to work in alignment to your values, and what a bold place to be. Um, we had a few more questions, but I know we're coming up on time. Alan, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you
Ah,
now. Yes.
yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, so there was one other question. We've got about 2 minutes before we wrap up. So there's a few more questions, but I'm gonna go to the next one I saw. So one, which I thought was great, is how do you establish yourself as a queer leader without being tokenized as a DEI practitioner? Um, I think that's an excellent question, right? About this idea of being tokenized. What are your thoughts on that, Alan?
That's actually a very simple one. You cannot control everything and everybody's thoughts. So
Yeah.
in a certain sense, the only thing that you can do is you only have power over yourself, right? Be authentic because
Right.
people will see you in different situations, and people will, I mean, like, people also have like this will feel if you are authentic, and that's very nice. If they can feel that your authenticity is that you're real, so then you don't have to worry about being tokenized.
Exactly. That was the word that came into my brain too, was authenticity, right? Is be yourself. You have no control outside of you what anyone thinks, how anyone's going to react, or however people are going to box you, right? So the best thing you can do is just walk your walk, be you, be your fabulous self, know your values, know where you're coming from. And if that's what they do, that's what they do, right? Fine.
Exactly.
I fight it.
And you know what
Um,
authenticity also is all about? Is being vulnerable.
that's right. That's right. Which is where the courage and bravery comes from, right? Um,
Exactly.
yeah, is putting yourself out there. And who knows what opportunity and possibilities can lead to that if we stay open, right? And we stay vulnerable and we be authentic. Mhm.
Be human.
Human, be a human. Yeah, excellent. Well, Bayless, I see you popping back on. I know we're
Yeah, it's such a great job. You're managing all the questions. I was just sitting back and taking everything in.
out of time.
So thank you so much, Kim and Alan, and thank you for everyone just interacting in the chat and sharing the questions. I mean, there were some really important points raised, and I love how you both of you kind of closed on this piece around authenticity, and which is again another word that means a lot but can tend to mean nothing if it's really not backed up by, you know, real lived experience, and also when we start to navigate, you know, the agency that we have, with our own power, our own truth, and following that path. So really appreciate you guiding us through these steps of defining, affirming, but also finding this somatic awareness, and listening to our bodies as well. So folks, thank you so much for coming. This really wraps the session for today. We'll be back for another Queer Leadership 101 webinar next month. As many of you know, I mean, it is Black History Month, and not necessarily focusing on the history part itself, but we wanted to invite some reflection, but also beyond even the awareness on how we can go about practicing anti-racism within LGBTQ plus leadership and allyship, which is quite interesting because if we're talking about, you know, inclusion and creating spaces of belonging, and driving change, sometimes when we focus on one historically marginalized group, we actually generalize experiences and start to ignore the intersectional differences. And in that webinar, we get to kind of unpack a bit further, you know, the importance of, you know, landing on intersectionality, and unpacking, you know, the root causes of you know, racism that can sometimes set us back, but what's the opportunity there for us as leaders by practicing anti-racism to create synergy across our movements, and to really make transformation happen for all. So we hope to see you there. And again, this session is being recorded, so if you feel like you need to catch up, that will be available on our YouTube page, and we'll send the link afterwards. If you want the slides as well, please reach out. We'll be able to send that through to you. But yeah, that's it. 2 minutes over. Anything else before we close this down? Alan, Kim?
No, just thank you so much for even having this conversation, for creating space for this conversation, for everyone who joined in, who are really focused on the culture change that we're all looking to make. This was enlivening. Thank you.
Yes, also thank you very much.
Thank you. Take care, everybody. Enjoy the rest of the day,
Bye.
morning, afternoon, evening, all of that good stuff, and see you soon. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.